Hello and welcome to another video for the New Zealand Regional Debate Development Program. This is a video series to help debaters across New Zealand improve their debating skills by giving them a number of videos to kind of look to and improve from. What I'm going to be covering in this video is how to give third speeches. But before I do that, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a secret, a little bit of a disclaimer. I'm actually not someone who gives third speeches a lot, so I wouldn't take this as gospel as much as I would take the other things I say as true. So if someone else comes and tells you that what I've said is incorrect, please listen to them, because there may be things in here that aren't quite as informative or as accurate as they can be. However, I think it's pretty good because I asked a friend of mine who is an immensely good third speaker what they think should be in here. So it's kind of their advice passed through me. Should we jump into it? What is your job as a third speaker? I would say there's kind of two things that you need to do. You need to firstly cover off any extraneous rebuttal in your speech, and then secondly, deal with any clash points. Obviously, like all speeches, I'd encourage you to have an introduction and a conclusion to your speech, but those things are a little bit easier to understand. You can look to my first speech video where I talk through what makes a good introduction and borrow that. But in this video, because the third speech is pretty complicated as a whole, I'm going to try focus on the actual content within it. So you need to cover off the extraneous rebuttal and clash points. I'm going to talk you through what that looks like now. Perfect. Extraneous rebuttal. Extraneous rebuttal is stuff that doesn't fit under your clash points. Your clash is going to be things that you need to select out that are the core kind of things that you're clashing over with the other team in the debate, but I'll get into that in a moment. But things that don't fit under there, I think should come out at the top of your speech. What I don't want you to think and go and do is I don't want you to say, any rebuttal I want to put in here should go in the extraneous rebuttal. I don't think that's true, because the truth is, if it's not in the clash point, it's probably not that debate winning, but there are exceptions to it. So if you do have extraneous rebuttal and you're like, dang, this is super important in debate winning, but it kind of covers the whole debate. It doesn't cover just one of my clashes. How do I deal with this? My idea would be to put it in the extraneous rebuttal, put it up the top of your speech. Deal with it for like 45 seconds, be like, hey, this is a big thing for all of the clash points or two of the clash points. I'm going to debunk it now and resolve this issue. Give 45 seconds of rebuttal analysis to prove your point, and then move on from it and get into your clash points. That's what I mean by extraneous rebuttal when I'm talking about it. I don't want you to give me some random claim they gave that isn't actually relevant to the debate. Great. Clash points. How many do you need? You need 2 to 3 clash points. I would verge on the side of 2 clash points on the whole. Even 1 clash point is acceptable in some debates, but I think 2 is probably your sweet spot. Some people say 2 to 3, and the reason they say that is because there are exceptions where there are 3 clash points in the debate. On the whole, though, I would say don't do 3 clash points unless you're really certain, because the truth is I don't believe there are actually 3 core areas that the debate will be won and lost over. I believe that there are probably 2, and there's kind of a third one you're on the line about. These clash points need to be the most important areas of the debate. They could be things that are debate winning for you, debate winning for the other side. They're the things that you think the judge is probably going to make their judgment on. How do you work out exactly what those are? The problem is that's not actually something I can teach you. That's something that you'll get a little bit of better intuition with over the course of the debate. But a good tip is to look for what were their substantive titles and what were your substantive titles at first, because it's probably going to be a pretty good guide for how the debate is going to pan out. I'd also flag for you that when you're selecting these, you don't just need to say, hey, here's one thing we claimed. If it's something that you both tried to claim, it's like we get the best, improvement in the lives of migrant workers, then that's great. You can just compare and contrast nice and easily. But if they're saying, look, we get a benefit to the economy, and you're like, we get a benefit to healthcare, you can put them in one point. You can be like, getting benefits to the economy versus getting benefits to healthcare, and you can talk through how those things battle it out and for value in the debate. Okay, how do you do a clash point, you're probably wondering. I'm going to give you a structure now on this next slide. Clash points. 4 key steps I would go through. 1, I'd give it a title. Make it nice and clear what you're doing. Say, hey, look, who gets the best outcomes for migrant workers? Or, what is more important in this debate? Economy versus health outcomes, right? That's nice and easy. If you give the judge a good title, it's much easier to follow. I'd also flag and say, hey, look, judge, I'm going to move on to my first clash. Here's what it is, and give the title of it. Because the truth is, third speeches naturally can be quite messy because you're dealing with so much content. Have the utmost respect for third speakers because it's a job that I don't do a lot. But the truth is, your speeches do get messy from time to time. So making sure you're very clear in your structure, super important. Next up, I would say, what is our contention in this debate? Like, what is the content we gave you, Judge? Chat through kind of briefly what they gave you. What I don't want to see is you running through the whole mechanism again. Just give the headers, give the titles. You can ask your first or your second speaker on the bench to like list them out, or you can jot them down the prep and say, hey, look, here's what we're trying to prove in this debate. And then defend that material. If it needs extra mechanisms, if you need to defend it from responses the other team's given, those are all plenty good things to do at the top of your speech. Make sure that what you are proving in the debate is nice and strong, and then you need to move into their content. You need to say, okay, what are we holding this up against? They might be making the same claim or a different claim. What did they claim? Tell the judge what that is and what their analysis was. Then work through what your team has said already. Say, look, my team's already responded to this, and said X. Don't repeat the whole thing because you've got limited time. Anything your team hasn't responded to, you need to respond to now. You are the last line of defense. No one else can respond to it after that because leaders' replies don't have rebuttal. So respond to anything they had left, and you want to explain why their thing is not standing. Then the last key bit that makes this different from just the rebuttal lecture I gave. Obviously, the rebuttal lecture is super important to you guys, but there's stuff that wasn't in the rebuttal lecture that I think is really important. And I think that's the weighting and why you are winning this debate. What does that look like? When you are comparing your analysis, you need to work out what are the things we're winning on most. And then you need to explain to the judge why that is by far the most important thing in the debate. Whether that's true or not is a different question, but you need to explain why it is, why it's helping a lot of people, why it's impacting a small group massively. Like, you need to explain to the judge why it's really important. And I don't just want you to explain why it's important, I want you to explain explicitly why is it that it's more important than what the other side is saying. So if they've said things that aren't just, okay, we prove something for migrants, you prove something for migrants that are both benefits, you need to explain why what you are doing is more important than what they're doing. Explain to me why your healthcare outcomes are more important than the economy. Explain why the benefits you bring to migrants are more beneficial than the benefits they bring to migrants. You're at a special point in the debate where you've seen the whole thing happen. So you're very capable of chatting through to the judge why it is that your stuff's more important. And on the back of that, you should explain to them why it is that you are going to be winning this point, right? You need to say, okay, little overview at the end of my point. Here's why we've won it, and here's why that's going to win us the debate. Great. Let's do the next slide. I've got some bonus tips for you. These are things that I say to debaters a lot, especially third speakers as a judge. So I give you this advice so that you don't have to have a judge tell them to you. You can have me tell them to you. The judge will definitely give you some different feedback, but you'll be a lot better going into the debate and you won't need to hear the feedback. 1, you should take them at their absolute best. I see a lot of teams in debating say, oh, this is kind of what they said, and take them in a terrible thing that they weren't really standing for and kind of straw man this argument for them and say, hey, look, here's what they stood for, and it's not really what they're standing for. So I want you to take their argument and I want you to say, hey, look, maybe this wasn't exactly what they said, but this is kind of what they were trying to get at. Don't do work for them to get there, but be like, hey, look, let's assume they didn't do the work for this, but let's assume they get to this benefit. Then explain why you beat them anyway, because when you're beating them at their best case scenario, the great thing for you is if the judge believed the best case scenario, you win. If the judge believed their worst case scenario, you also win. The problem is if you take them at their worst and the judge believes their best case scenario, you're probably going to lose, and that's not great. So that's why I tell you to take them at the best. Also, kind of throughout the speech, I want you to be explaining all the time, what is the impact of this on the debate? Why is this helping me and my team win this debate? That means why is this point of rebuttal damaging their team's case? Why is it that this is helping, our substantive advance? because all the time, you should be thinking about this anyway. You should be thinking to yourself, how is this helping me win the debate? And then you should be telling the judge that. I don't need a whole laundry list summary of how it's helping you win the debate, but I do need you to tell the judge, because if you're not telling the judge, it can be really hard for them to follow what this is doing to the debate and how it's helping you win. Perfect. Thank you so much for tuning in to this lecture on third speeches. I hope it's been helpful. I'm sure it's not as helpful as my other videos because I just don't have as much experience, but I didn't want to leave the third speaking debaters of New Zealand without coaches, hanging without any resource. So don't get me wrong, this is still a very good third speech structure. It may just not be as good as my first and second speech videos because it's not something I've experienced with, but I've consulted and chatted to a lot of good debaters who have told me this is a good way to approach it. So thank you so much for tuning in. I wish you the absolute best with your next debate, whether that is a regionals, a practice debate against another school. Hopefully it may even be a club round that you're going to do a practice for now. Thank you once again for tuning in. I hope this was useful. I hope you took notes, even though I forgot to remind you at the start. And all the very best going forward with your debating.